We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. It's as simple as that.
We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies, Mr. Beale. The world is a business, Mr. Beale.
Go on without me. Just go.
A good soldier never leaves a man behind.
Because I wouldn't give you 2 cents for all your fancy rules if behind them they didn't have a little bit of plain, ordinary, everyday kindness.
Life finds a way.
Welcome to Silver Screen Biases. Each week we pick a movie off of IMDb's top 250 and dig into it. We're examining truth claims in critically acclaimed movies while also examining our own biases. I'm Nelson.
This is Jeff.
And this week we're joined by Angela Mannarino. Angela, say hi.
Hi.
So Angela is my coworker, boss, and friend with Americans for Prosperity. Angela, tell us a little bit about Americans for Prosperity.
Yeah, so Americans for Prosperity, we're a nonprofit grassroots organization. We're nonpartisan as well, so we're not beholden to any party, any person, any donor, anything like that. And we get out in the community and we try to talk about policy that's affecting people's lives and teach them how to fight against big government.
I love it. I love it so much. It's one of my favorite things to do.
You should join.
Yeah, it sounds like a perfect place for me.
Awesome. Angela, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you hail from, generally speaking? And is prosperity for people, peace and prosperity, what's it called?
Americans for Prosperity.
Americans for Prosperity. Screw the other people, just Americans. Is this the only thing you do, or do you have other things that you like to fill your time with?
Yep, Americans for Prosperity is my full-time job. I've been interested in politics since I was very little, around 5. And, I'm finally blessed to be able to work in a position where I can do that full-time. Other than that, I really love movies, actually. So I'm a huge movie buff, and I love studying them. I love, watching them. I love doing all of that kind of stuff, and just a lot of artistic stuff in general, including music, books, stuff like that. So
that's fantastic. Awesome. Where do you hail from? Just not specifically your address.
Cleveland area, right?
Cleveland, Northeast Ohio.
Cleveland area, yes. Northeast Ohio. I'm about 15 minutes east of Cleveland. So
awesome. Did you hear the air show this past weekend?
I didn't actually hear it too much, so it wasn't bad. I usually do. Usually the house rocks.
We're recording this episode just after Labor Day, and so Cleveland has a big air show. Yeah, every Labor Day they have the air show. So,
and this week we're covering a very specific movie that when I first told Angela about our podcast, she insisted that when we get to this movie, she be on it. Why is it, Angela? Why is it that you so badly wanted to cover The Godfather?
I think it's really relevant still in today's not only political climate, but social climate as well. And I think that Vito specifically handles situations that are very well done. They're very calm. They're very well thought out. And I think that people could utilize that more instead of just working on emotion and being able to separate the two. So I think there's a lot of really good examples in that as well. And I really do think it's a movie that everybody should see.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Angela, but you also identify somewhat with the American-Italian or Italian-American, depending on which order you put in experience. Is that right?
Yes. So I am first generation American. So I have a lot of family that's actually still over in Italy. So I've been watching mob movies and The Godfather since I was little. It took me 3 or 4 times to actually watch the movie all the way through for me to fully understand the players and fully understand the exact scope of what was going on. And it intrigued me so much. I loved Goodfellas. I loved stuff like that, to where it was really interesting. And I think it really hits close to home because a lot of the traditions are the same, and a lot of it's Roman Catholic, and a lot of it, I went through growing up. So it's really interesting, even though it's a different time period. The attitude and cultural, it doesn't really change. I'm very thankful that my father kept that alive so I could experience some of that.
Have you ever been to Italy?
I have not. Trying to.
Yeah. I was.
We're from Calabria, so we're pretty south, right? Kind of by the boot.
Okay.
The boot. Das Boot.
Oot and a boot.
Yeah.
Have you seen On the Waterfront?
No, I don't believe so.
That's our most recent, before Godfather, mob movie. I think it was our first mob movie. And
first Marlon Brando movie.
First Marlon Brando movie as well. And it's all about the kind of dangerous combination of the mafia and union labor, which gets hinted at a little bit in this movie, but not really. They don't really dive into it too much.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Now, outside of On the Waterfront, Nelson, was this the first mob movie you've seen in a while?
Yeah.
Okay. I've seen Public Enemy, the Johnny Depp movie. So I've seen mobster movies, but like this is the first time where I've seen like mob warfare. Like as far as like,
Yep.
and outside of, maybe like watching shows like Gotham and stuff where it's a different type of mob type scenario. But like this is my first kind of introduction to this type of genre of films and stuff. And honestly, like it's not a non-fictional movie. Like it's not based on historical events, but like stuff like this happened.
Yeah.
I found this very fascinating, just as like this was a lifestyle. This was a world for people. This type of like living within this underground culture and stuff. Like I found this very
Cosa Nostra.
Yeah.
Yep.
Bless you.
It's totally unlike this, Jeff, but already we're way off course.
I think we're on par.
Angela, we have some questions for you.
Yes, we do. Yeah. All right, questions we ask our guests every time they're on. First and foremost, which we've already tapped into a little bit, what's your political biases?
I am a constitutional conservative. I'm for free markets and liberty for all.
Right on. Constitutional conservative. How close is that to libertarian? Just because I think this is the first time constitutional conservatives have come up in conversation.
Yeah, libertarian's pretty close. I honestly, a lot of it's semantics, which is why I don't say I'm a libertarian. To be 100% like a true libertarian, Okay. So that's really all it is. There's just a couple things with the party that I'm not super fans of.
She's a conservative that wants to conserve the U.S. Constitution, which was written by liberals, but today what their politics are, we would call libertarian.
Gotcha. Okay.
Would you agree with that, Angela?
Absolutely. Yep.
Cool. All right. What's your religious bias? Where do you stand when it comes to faith or anything adjacent to that category?
I am a Christian. Raised Roman Catholic, but Christian.
You're gonna be excited to hear this, Jeff. But just this last weekend, Angela was baptized.
Hey! Congratulations! That's awesome.
Thank you very much. It was amazing.
That's incredible.
I was so excited for her when I heard about it.
I was baptized as a kid. I mean, I knew what I was doing. I was cognitive of like the decision I made and like that faith journey I was starting. But like, I feel like to do it as an adult, there'd be a different weight to it, and like something that like I can't tap into. Because like it's awesome that like to do that as an adult and to like to experience that in this time of life. That's really cool.
Thank you. So, it was awesome.
I was a young little buck when it happened. Okay, and then last but not least, we talked about this a little bit as well. What's your favorite movies or genre movies, director? Just how would you describe yourself when it comes to the silver screen?
Absolutely. So my absolute favorite genre in the entire world are actually horror movies. I love Wes Craven. He is one of my favorite directors.
What are some Wes Craven movies? Because we're not really horror movie guys.
The Last House on the Left, Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream. Those are ones that he personally had all of the involvement with. And he has a few other ones too.
Basically, what the original Scary Movie movies were spoofing?
Well, Scream was the original, and then Scary Movie spoofed it.
I suppose so. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, so I see Wes Craven's passed away in 2015. Yes. I'm just looking at his list here. Yeah, because I don't think we haven't come across any of his yet. Because like I know they're still making Scream movies. So how do you feel about the most recent Scream movie that came out?
It is it's nothing like Wes Craven's direction, to be fair, but I think it's actually very well written. I thought the story surprisingly went in a very good direction. I did not go in with crazy high hopes because I wasn't the biggest fan of the fifth installment. So I didn't go in with crazy high hopes. They changed the setting and stuff, but I really thought they outdid themselves. And I'm pretty actually excited for the seventh one because I think that they're
there's
a very different direction that is extremely interesting and tapping into just culture and how everything is today and watching the franchise being able to go from the 90s until now with technology and all that stuff is really cool.
Now, you said that you liked the sixth one, even though Wes Craven wasn't involved, but you didn't care for the fifth. Was he involved with the fifth one?
He was not. He passed right after the fourth movie. So the fourth Scream was the last one that he had complete involvement in. The last directors from the last two, the fifth and sixth, were huge Wes Craven fans. And you could see it in a lot of their work. They really did a lot of homages really well and stuff like that, which was really appreciated. But I believe that there's actually a new director taking foot for Scream 7, which makes me a tad nervous. So, I mean, we'll just kind of see how it goes.
Now, the only thing I know about this Scream series that just from social media is there's big talks about Matthew Lillard coming back for the new one, like being a surprise cameo. Shaggy from the Scooby-Doo.
Yeah. That's where I know him from.
He's also doing, so he's still doing horror because he's in the Five Nights at Freddy movie.
Mm.
Yes.
It's like, do you think?
And Scooby-Doo is horror.
Yeah, it's true. Do you think Matthew Lillard will end up being the big baddie that people are speculating for this news?
No, I am a diehard. So his name is Stu in the film, and I am a diehard. Stu died. He died in Scream 1. He got hit by a TV and electrocuted, and people think he's going to come back to life.
Yep.
And that is a huge debate right now and has been for a little bit. But I am a very big Stu is dead fan, and I think it would be personally cheap writing to do that, but it would kind of like a cop out, which is why I'm not the biggest fan of that.
It's fan service, yeah.
So we can go back to this hopefully when Scream 7 comes out and see if I was correct.
If it makes the top 250, we'll have you back on for it.
Yeah, we did this last October. I think we're going to do it again this October. Is spend all of our movies through October are going to be scary movies, which is not really Jeff and my forte.
Nah.
But Spooktober's fun. So
yeah.
definitely
The Shining will probably be in there.
Yeah.
That's
Aliens.
a fantastic
The
one.
plural. The plural to the first movie.
Yeah. There's more of them. So Nelson, what movie are we talking about this week?
The Godfather.
Part 1.
That's right.
Which when it first came out, it wasn't part 1, but
That's right. It's like Star Wars: A New Hope.
It's a trilogy of movies. This one came out in 1972. It runs about 2 hours and 55 minutes.
Did you know it's currently a trilogy, but it was nearly a series?
What do you mean by it?
There was going to be a fourth one.
There was.
It never kind of got off the ground. It was going to be a prequel and sequel simultaneously, which, according to what I saw on Wikipedia,
Time travel.
is like the second one, which I've not seen yet.
Yeah,
So that doesn't mean anything to me.
Now, have you watched the whole trilogy, Angela?
I have, and you will understand that when you get to the second one.
Okay, yeah. Nelson and I have not seen the other two.
We've not seen the other two. The second one is in the top 250.
Yeah, so that's next week's episode.
That's next week's episode.
Spoiler alert.
The third one is not in the top 250, so we won't be covering it on the show.
Nope.
Third one's vastly different than the rest of them. The third one is completely different than the first two. But every time I watch the first one, I think the first one's better. And every time I watch the second one, I think the second one's better. I think they're extremely close in terms of how good that they are. So
Yeah, this one came out in 1972. The second one came out in 1974. So
that's right.
You could definitely tell, like, with that close of a gap, like, they had at least planned for the two movies. They knew at the end of the first.
I feel the way this movie ends, there's not like the game is afoot feeling of there will be a sequel.
Oh, no, I just figured with that small of a gap, they already knew that they were planting their feet into a sequel. But either way, so
it also could have just been like the first one was so good, the studio was like, give us more.
Yeah. Then the third one came out in 1990.
Yeah.
So there was 16 years between the second and third. So this movie is directed by Francis Ford Coppola.
Coppola. Is this our first Francis Ford Coppola movie?
Yes, it is. Not our last.
At least one more.
Correct. So some other notable movies from him as a director: Apocalypse Now, which is in the top 250.
Yep. The Conversation, I think, is in the top 250 as well. Have you seen Apocalypse Now and the Conversation?
I have not. I haven't heard of The Conversation, actually.
One of my favorite Robin Williams movies,
Jack?
is Francis Ford Coppola.
No way.
And that I learned that as I was doing my research for this movie. Jack is a wonderful, emotional movie.
He also did Bram Stoker's Dracula in 92.
I have no idea what that is.
It's about Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Gotcha. I'm feeling that you don't even know what that is.
Yeah, it's
stop it.
It's Dracula by Bram Stoker.
You're fired. So essentially there's just Apocalypse Now and Jack are the only other movies that I recognize. You said you recognize The Conversation.
Yeah, if that is what I think it is. Which it might not be.
Well, The Outsiders. Is that The Outsiders?
It might be An Outsiders.
Like, is that the iconic? Hold on, let me load it up here. Because if it is, this is an iconic. Yeah, this is the
one with Ponyboy.
Yeah, Matt Dillon, Ralph Macchio. So he directed the iconic Outsiders movie.
Another great movie about
Patrick
organized
Swayze,
crime and violence.
Emilio Estevez, Tom Cruise.
That's really more disorganized crime, I guess.
That's okay. So that's exciting. So some other notable cast in this movie. Marlon Brando, obviously.
Yeah. This was his comeback.
He was Don Vito,
the
Godfather.
Don Vito Corleone.
We've got Al Pacino.
Yep.
Very iconic in these types of movies.
Yeah.
I feel like he got typecasted a lot with this genre and this category of movies.
Or maybe he was just selective in what he accepted.
Could have been. Scipio.
Dog Day Afternoon.
Dog Day Afternoon.
He's in Dick Tracy.
according to the internet. He's in House of Gucci, which House of Gucci was awesome.
Yeah.
The Irishman.
He's
Yeah,
done great.
obviously he's a big name.
The guy that played Sonny has had like a mixed bag of movies.
Who? Let me go back
James
to the movie.
Caan.
Here. Who was James Caan? That's
Yeah.
who I was looking up next.
Con!
Rollerball.
R.I.P.
Yeah, he did.
Actually, just last year. He
Yeah.
passed away just
Yes.
last year. Yeah. Out of the Blue, Holy Lands.
There's a movie in my mind where he plays like a jerk. Elf. He's the dad from Elf.
No, wait.
Yeah.
Wait, is he for real?
Yeah, he is.
No, hold on.
Yeah, and he has to.
I don't know if I've ever noticed that.
Yeah, he's the dad in Elf. I guarantee.
No, yeah, Walter. Holy
Yeah.
cow.
Yeah,
2003. That's fantastic.
it's great.
He's in Get Smart. So yeah, next on the list, because there's some pretty big names in here. Robert Duvall.
Yeah, as the consigliere.
Sure. No, yeah, Tom Hagee.
Hey,
Hagee, thank you. Yeah, he's got quite a bit of movies.
He's
on
not
there.
done a whole lot of note though.
Not recently.
More of
but-
a B-list actor.
Ah. Oh, you're joking. I see. Secondhand Lions.
That's a great movie. Secondhand Lions is such a good movie.
John Q. Gone in 60 Seconds.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Deep Impact. Sling Blade.
He's in Sling Blade?
Yeah, he's the Blade.
Who's the
He's in-
Sling?
he's in Newsies. Handmaid's Tale. So yeah, keep going here. Let's. We got Diane Keaton,
Yeah. Brother to
the only
Buster
prominent
Keaton.
female in this movie.
Is she related to to Buster Keaton?
Or Michael Keaton? Is she? I don't know her familia.
Because Buster Keaton was like early days of Hollywood actor.
Sure.
We got a couple Buster Keaton movies on the top 50.
Yeah, she was in Father of the Bride Part 2. Great movies. Without me Googling it, which
Yeah.
to save time,
There's
I'll
no
do
time.
that later.
There's no time
but
to find
I don't
that
know
out.
if she's related to the other Keatons.
Yeah,
With,
well, I know Michael Keaton's real name isn't Michael Keaton. We talked about this in another episode.
Correct. That's true. That's true. We did talk about it. And the other person that I thought was of reference, the last person I saw on the list, was Abe Vigoda.
I don't know that name.
I know him from the Good Burger movie.
Oh, he's in Good Burger?
He's the old man that works in the Good Burger. That's
who is he in The Godfather?
He's the guy that betrays Michael.
Sal Tessio.
Oh, Tessio.
Yeah.
My
I
first
always
interaction with Abe Vigoda was from Good Burger, Keenan and Kel.
He's Otis in Good Burger.
Otis, yes, that movie, and there's a sequel of that one coming out.
Yeah,
this
that's
year
right.
on Paramount Pictures Plus streaming.
Sequel to Good Burger. There's still
Yeah.
something to live for.
So very good cast. And before we get into the stats, I also just want to acknowledge the music of this movie.
yeah.
This music, the soundtrack, really set the setting.
Yeah.
It was the same music whether the scenes were in New York,
Mhm.
California, or Italy, and I appreciated that because it kept the vibe the same.
Yeah.
It had that same ominous, just kind of there's trouble afoot type of music, no matter where they were geographically. I appreciated the music in this movie so much.
Mhm.
I thought that told a lot of the story when there was no dialogue.
Yeah.
So I wasn't familiar with the composer.
Let's talk stats.
But yeah, let's go into stats here. So 9.2 out of 10 on the
Mhm.
IMDb. This is currently the second movie on the top 250.
Yeah.
Number 2.
Number
It's
2.
the highest rated movie we've done. There's only one more above it.
That's right.
It's 97% on the tomato meter and 98% in the audience.
When IMDb first launched, it debuted at 17. In 1998, it hit 1, and it bounced back and forth between 1 and 2 until 2008, when it dropped where it is now.
Okay. Do you have the budget for this movie?
I do. Cost $6 million to make in 1972, so that's 631% inflation, taking us to $44 million. And then the movie takes place in the 40s and 50s,
Mhm.
which is an average inflation of about 2,000. So you take any of the numbers that they talk about for money, multiply it by 20.
Okay.
And remember, the reason that money is worth less today than it used to be is because they keep printing more of it.
Mhm. The more you know. Da, 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 da. I have to.
Taxation is theft.
That's right, it is.
All right, so we kind of got the gist of our thoughts about this. Let's before we get into the deep topics here and stuff. That's it, kind of for the topical things. Like Nelson, did you like this movie? What was your take of your first round with The Godfather?
First time watching The Godfather, I had a shock 45 minutes in when Vito Corleone died, and then another shock shortly after when he didn't actually die, but then yet another shock at the end when he did die. I didn't know that he died in this movie. I assumed that he was in the first two.
I thought he was
The Godfather.
Yeah.
No, but apparently, The Godfather is about Michael.
Right.
which
I liked that twist.
Yeah,
I liked.
So I've seen a handful of mob war movies. It's a genre within the genre,
Mhm.
right? And I was worried going into this because I've seen so many, and so many of them pay homage to it, that this would feel way too familiar, and like, because it defined the genre, it would just feel dry and boring. But I think it still stands up really, really well against all of the ones that have come after it.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Obviously, Angela, this was not your first round with the movie. Did you watch it recently for this episode of the podcast?
I did. I watched it maybe the last few days ago, something like that. So I did rewatch it as well. So
was it a different experience for you, or have you watched it enough to where like it's pretty much memorized? Did you notice anything new? Or
I think I don't know. I think something always sticks out to me whenever I watch it. I think that's the beauty of all of this. Even knowing how they filmed it and how, Coppola made sure, I believe it was like 5 feet or something. You guys can even fact check that 'cause I'm not sure of the number, but they kept it a steady angle the entire time, while they were filming to keep it, the same ambiance and just different things that you notice, like, oranges being, symbolism for death in the movie. Michael's character development, I think, is insane. I think it's a great, they told it perfectly. You can see it in his eyes when he kind of just becomes very cold-blooded and very different than Vito in a lot of ways. I don't think Vito would have handled a lot of situations the way that he would. So I think every time I look back on it, I'm learning other social cues or just other things for life that I think that are just very interesting and that I appreciate just about the movie in general.
Really? I will say, the Michael storyline was the one that I didn't expect, and it was the one I appreciated the most. At the wedding scene, he was there. He was in his military garb. He was talking to Kay, Diane Keaton, and talking about it's my dad's business, but I'm not like that. I'm not in that. I don't do that stuff. But by the end of the movie, you see him lie to Kay and go, when it talks about the killing of
Carlo,
yeah,
his brother-in-law,
and he's like, nope, I did not have a hand in it. And then I loved the way this movie ended.
Yeah,
where they start talking, and the door
closes and then roll credits. I thought that was a really
her face is just
beautiful ending.
I thought that was incredible.
Yeah.
But watching this movie, this almost 3-hour movie, like, his transformation made sense. He knew his dad was into some dirty, dark underground stuff, but in the same time, his love for his family, his desire to put family first, no matter what it takes to make them prosper and thrive, was the linchpin for him to go, okay, Dad, I see you. All right, I'll do this once. I'll go to the diner with these 2 guys once. I'll shoot the dirty cop. I'll justify the dirty cop.
But he didn't even do that as a favor to his dad. Like, it's not like his dad asked for it. Like, that was his idea.
Right, but I don't think he would have done it if he didn't have the dad like he did.
Sure.
It's in his blood whether he wanted to, like, it was in his genetics, essentially. Like, it's like I appreciated watching his storyline play out, and just it felt natural with the way that he was presented, with the life that he lived. It felt natural for where he ended up at the end of the movie.
Yeah. I was surprised to see Sonny die. I was expecting, because until the moment Sonny dies, I would say he was the main character. And that's
the older brother, right?
Yeah. And
Sonny, Michael.
And Michael's character felt very much like a side story. And then Fredo's character in the first one, it's like he's not even in the movie, right?
He was aloof.
And aloof is one word for it. Anyway, I was really surprised when Sonny died, and actually died.
Spoiler alert.
And then the movie quickly pivots to Michael being the main character.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really interesting directorial, like they sold it. They sold that Sonny's the main character until that point. So.
Well, and I think it's very cool seeing the comparison of even Fredo, because you will see more of him in the second, but even in the first one, looking at how Sonny handles these situations versus Michael, versus Fredo, versus Vito, I think we can all take from, like, Sonny's very emotional. He's a hot-headed, and their opposition knew that. The other families use that to their advantage in multiple ways, including Carlo, to be able to actually try to get this drug deal done and to try to overtake the Corleone family. So looking at how you actually react to these situations, and by using logic and a lot of times patience. I mean, I think people don't, like, this movie takes place over a long span of time.
Yeah.
It's not a few months. I mean, Michael was in Sicily
about a decade. Yeah.
That
Well,
was.
I thought he was in
it's
Sicily
very
for 3
long.
years, wasn't he?
It could be 3.
Because
I read 2,
watched,
but it could be 3.
okay, because I thought he was gone for a total of 4. I thought him and Kay were apart from each other for 4 years. He was in Sicily for 3, and then he was in America for 1. That's how I interpret it. I could be wrong.
That
with
could
that.
be.
Okay.
I'm about to
Well, yeah.
read actually the book, so
Are you really?
it should honestly hopefully clear a lot of the stuff up that's kind of like up in the air that doesn't clearly state it in the
Right.
movie. So I'm hoping that will. I think that'll be.
And I'm glad you brought that up. This is something that we talk about in the movies now. This movie is based on a book.
That's
do you
right.
have the author do either of you had the author handy?
Mario Puzo.
Huzo, you say?
Yes,
What year was it wrote?
I do not have that.
It was 1969.
1969. Okay, so right before the movie. Okay.
Yeah. 3 years later, it was turned into a film.
Okay.
You know, it's crazy. One thing that we see pretty consistently is that these, especially with these older movies that are based on books, they're turned into a movie like 2 or 3 years later.
Yeah.
Like it's almost immediate. But now it's more common to, like, when a book gets turned into a movie, it's decades old.
Yeah.
And they're more likely to recycle a movie concept than to adapt a book concept.
Now it does say here, like, depending on how you interpret this on IMDb, Mario Puzo is one of the writers for the film.
Oh.
So I don't know if that meant he did more for the film outside of the book, or they're
Yeah.
using that as part of the screenplay. So he is credited as a writer for the film as well. I'd be interested to see what you think of that book. It's and see like just how much more expansive. Now, do you know does this book cover just the first movie?
So there's 4 books.
Oh.
I believe this covers just the first,
Okay.
but it goes into the backstories of like all the Dons. It goes into the backstory of Fabrizio and how he turned on Michael and all of that kind of stuff, where again, it's just not clearly stated in the movie. It kind of leaves a little bit of things to, what happened to him, or how did he know this was going to happen type of
Right.
thing. It clears all of that up. It has all the backstories and all the connections of everything. From what I saw, like Vito and Barzini, they have a huge feud from the past, which influenced a lot of this movie that isn't shown in any of the movies.
Okay.
I think it'll be really cool to read it after watching it so many times and putting a lot of pieces together and stuff like that. So
That's fantastic. No, I appreciate that.
Looking at the Wikipedia here, the sequels. In 1984, Puzo's literary sequel to The Godfather was published, titled The Sicilian. It chronicles the life of Salvatore Giuliano, but the Corleone family is featured heavily throughout. For copyright reasons, the Corleone family was cut from Michael Cimino's film adaptation, which is not considered part of the film
So the
series.
Sicilian was made into a film, but not connected to the Godfather series because of copyright stuff.
That's right.
Fascinating.
Then there's still several other Godfather books. So The Godfather Returns picks up the story immediately after the end of the first book, The Godfather, covers the years 1955 to 62. But The Godfather Part 2 takes place within the same time frame, but only mentioned, like the things happening in the book only happen in the background of the second movie. And then there's The Godfather's Revenge, which is 63 to 64, and features kind of conversations about the mafia's involvement with Sinatra, the Kennedys, that kind of stuff. All, of course, they change names to make it fit okay. So it looks like The Godfather Part 3 is not based off of any of the books.
Okay.
So yeah.
Right on.
So you've got some reading ahead of you,
Oh
Angela.
yeah, just the first one alone is absolutely huge.
Yeah.
So it's going to take a minute to get
It's
through.
huge.
Huge. So it's going to take a second to get through, but I'm super excited. I think I'll be able to learn a lot.
Nice. If listeners at home, if you're curious about the book that inspired the movie, you can use our Amazon affiliate link below. Thanks for setting that up for us, Angela.
Yeah,
that was a nice
appreciate that.
layup. All right. Any other facts and stats and such before we get into the film?
If I can say, there is obviously this
You can.
movie is quoted all the time.
Yeah.
I forgot about the scene I'm about to reference, except for right before it happened. I was like, "This is the scene. This is the scene."
Yeah.
The horse head scene.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so I've never seen Scarface. I've never seen Goodfellas, and this is my first time going through Godfather.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know which movie had what.
Right.
Obviously, Scarface is
Kind of
a
like
little
that
different.
on the waterfront line that I thought was from this
Correct.
movie.
Yeah, correct. So
I could have been a contender.
I didn't pick up on it when they were showing that $600,000 horse. The earlier scene,
Yeah.
I didn't think anything of it. I was like, okay, cool, horse, money, betting, whatever.
Yeah.
But then when they slowly scanned the guy in the bed, I'm like, I fangirled so hard. I'm like, I'm finally watching this scene.
Yeah.
It's happening. there's a head in there. Like, I was yelling at the TV. I was so excited that I'm finally viewing this iconic moment in cinema history. So that part hooked me as far as just experiencing that for the first time. And then the other part that I was just like, seeing it said was, leave the gun, take the cannolis.
Yeah, leave the gun, take the cannolis.
That was an improv line as well.
That was improv?
That was improv.
That's amazing.
The leave the gun was in, but take the cannoli was improv.
Yeah.
I love that. That line, I was so happy to experience that authentically and not knowing it was coming.
Yeah.
It was great.
There's oh crap, what's his name?
Samuel L. Jackson.
He founded the Proud Boys. He's a Canadian comedian. He also founded Vice.
Oh, I don't know.
I can't remember his name, but I know who you're talking about.
Gavin McInnes. So Gavin McInnes was one of 3 Canadians who founded Vice.
Oh.
After they sold it off, he pursued comedy. One time in a podcast episode, he made jokes about starting a kind of men's social club based off, joking off of Proud of Your Boy. And I don't know what that's a reference to. Just a bunch of weird references. And the way you joined the group was you'd have to get beat up while you say 6 major brand name cereals. Right? It was just the whole thing was a big joke. And that's what became Proud Boys, which he is no longer associated with. But way back when, before he was canceled and persona non grata, he did a really hilarious video that I love showing people. I love showing this to Americans, and they get so upset about it. And it's 10 things Canadians should know before they move to America.
Okay.
And one of them is Americans have a bizarre amount of knowledge about pop culture, like who played who and who was in what movie, and 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon type stuff. And then one that follows up right after that, I'm pretty sure, is about how every American has seen The Godfather a bunch of times, and they quote it constantly, and it's super annoying. And I've never entirely gotten the joke, but now watching the movie, I'm like, yeah, I've heard this line so many times from people that really aren't badass enough to pull off the line. Angela's told me the story. We're not going to say who it was, but there was a gentleman that she was speaking to through work, and he's like, I'm like Michael Corleone of whatever county he's from. And he's not. He's just some guy.
Yeah, after seeing the movie, it's how, if you have to say that, you're clearly not, first off. There was a couple, so there are some quotes that I really love in The Godfather that I think aren't quoted as much.
Yeah.
One of them is when Vito's talking to Michael when they're going over the Barzini meeting, right before Vito dies.
Yeah.
And, he says, I refuse to be a fool dancing on strings held by all of those big shots.
Mm-hmm.
I think that says a lot of his motivation of where he's coming from. And I think that's a very underrated line, just as this one, when they're in the commission, you talk about vengeance, but is vengeance going to bring your son back to me or mine back to me? They're very serious, actually heavy topics that I think personally aren't quoted as much. Everyone will say, take the gun, leave the gun, take the cannoli. They'll say all those ones.
Right.
A man who doesn't spend time with his family can never really be a man.
Yeah, I got that in my notes here.
These kinds of things that are beautiful, I think, sentiments that aren't quoted just as much as a lot of the other ones.
With some of those quotes that Don Vito made, obviously, I found myself rooting for the Corleone family.
Corleone.
Corleone has a first name. It's Oscar.
Yeah. Corleone has a second name.
But in that same breath, I also realized that I'm rooting for a family that's pro their family, but also not really morally ethical outside of their family. Well, even within the family, there was some shady business going on. Stuff do you think Don Vito's views in that specific scenario you were talking about when he was meeting with before he got shot up at the fruit stand? Do you think that he's being hypocritical at all? Saying he won't do this, but yet he's pulling strings for other things for other people. Do you think there was a little bit of tension there of it's just more of a I'm going to pick my poison type of situation? Or
I think he knows deep down he'll die before he's controlled. Okay. Whereas politicians and the people that are actually being bought, he can't be bought. And I think that's kind of the point,
Yeah.
is he's standing on that loyalty of himself, where he knows that these other people, they're going to go where the money is.
Yep.
They're going to go where the business is. They're going to go where the good PR is. And you see a lot more of that actually unfold in the second one, but you see a lot of that. So I think that's more of what it was.
I just kind of questioned myself. I was like, oh, wait, I'm rooting for these guys. Wait a second. They're also the bad guys because
they're all criminals.
They're all five families are criminals.
Yeah.
But like we're seeing it from the one perspective, and we're getting attached to these family characters. We're getting even if they are rough, even if the one brother is a sleazeball and goes and gets with a bridesmaid during the wedding, even though they're not ethical, like I'm still like I want this family to win out of the other four because like I know them. Like it was a weird emotion because I'm like I'm rooting for them. I want them to come out where they want to go, but at the same time I'm like they're all dirty.
Yeah,
it was just weird.
Well, and I think a good example of that is when they're actually at the commission, because Vito's, response to this whole drug thing is vastly different than every other Don that's there.
Correct.
And he's coming at it from a very, hey, I don't want women and children in our communities actually getting a hold of this. And this is dangerous. And like he says with Sollozzo, this is, congratulations on your business, but I'm going to say no. I believe that this is a dangerous business. And I think that even in that meeting alone, you can see the difference in their mindset as far as that kind of stuff is concerned. He's like, it's not like gambling or liquor or even women, which are harmless vices, even with police and stuff like that. Now we're talking narcotics, totally different ball game. So I think Vito for him to catch on to that when Sonny and Tom didn't, and Tom's his consigliere, who's the highest of the family, he's the advisor. And for both of them to be hot for that deal and Vito to see, which we now know culturally was a huge issue that should never have happened, for him to be able to see that then and be able to stand and say, no, I'm not doing this. I think says a lot too in comparison to how the other families are, which could be why you rooted for them. There's a different sense of morality that they have, in my opinion, compared to the other families.
Yeah. I don't know if either of you are watching, or Angela, I'm not sure if you're a Star Wars person, but like I compared Don Vito a lot to what I know of a Grand Admiral Thrawn from Rebels and soon to be in the Ahsoka series. He never got aggressive. There was a couple times where he got firm, but like he never got super angsty or like chaotic. He was always methodical. Every word he spoke was intentional. Every breath he took was him chewing on the words of everyone else and contemplating it and playing chess with everyone else.
His patience was almost more intimidating than Sonny's aggression.
Right. Like the scariest character, or like the most intimidating character in this whole series was Don Vito, just because of his ability to just be silent.
And then Michael is kind of like the fusion of those two.
Yeah. So
he's got that patience, and you can tell like he's ready to be violent himself.
And so I just appreciated that from him as well. For him, it's a chess game. For him, it's a sit back, watch it, and then make the move at the most opportune time, rather than being right at the trigger and pulling every trigger that you can and just being hot. You know what I mean? Like, I appreciated his strategicness. And obviously he's seasoned. He's been doing this for years. He's no fool. Mm-hmm. Like he knows how to run this business. I mean, look at the 56-acre estate that they had. Like, honestly, like if there were to add to these films, I would love to know how he became into power. Like, I would love to see his rise to power.
You will.
I think that would be fat.
So you'll get all of your.
All right,
it's
that's exciting. Okay,
is that the second or the third?
Second.
Okay.
And I think that's an interesting point though, because like Sonny's hot-headedness got him killed directly. If he would have played that situation differently, and Carlo on the opposite side also played that perfectly. If you're looking at it from the opposite point of view, Carlo and Barzini actually played that to a T to get what they wanted. They wanted Sonny out. And they knew that his emotions were the way to do that. So by Michael seeing, even though he was in Sicily, but seeing all of these people around him react this way, and him being from the military, so he already has that discipline. He fought in World War II. It's almost a sense of, I thought Michael is the most terrifying, because you can see it in his eyes, like his eyes change throughout the movie. And by the end, they're just black. And he looks almost soulless in a way, after he finishes all the family business and he's finally, officially the Godfather. So I think it also shows that temperament. Sonny directly got killed because of his hot-headedness, and they boasted about it.
Yep.
Yeah. So we've jumped over a handful of different things, and some of these are really great things I want to drill into a little deeper.
Let's do it.
So I'm going to start with talking about drug war.
Yes.
So The Italian families were very busy. The Italian mafia families, I should clarify, were very busy during the Prohibition era of alcohol in the early 20s. And throughout this movie, we see how they're continuing to profit off of prohibition of gambling, prohibition of prostitution, prohibition of eventually narcotics, but the Corleone family doesn't take part. Interestingly, it's not Vito Corleone that says anything about women and children. That actually comes from Don Zalucci, who was not one of the five families, but he was like another regional representative. And he stood up and he said, "I don't believe in drugs. For years, I paid my people extra so they wouldn't do that kind of business, $200 a week. But it didn't matter. Somebody comes to them and says, I have powders. If you put up $3,000-$4,000 investment, we can make $50,000 distributing. Who can resist such a profit? There's no way to control it as a business, to keep it respectable. I don't want it near schools. I don't want it sold to children. That's an infamita, which means a heinous act against your own family. In my city, I would try to keep the traffic and the dark people, the colored. They are the best customers, the least troublesome, and they are animals anyway. They have no respect for their wives or their families or themselves. Let them lose their souls with drugs, but something has to be done. We can't have everybody running around doing just what they please like a bunch of anarchists."
Is that from the book?
That's the script.
Oh, okay. I was like, that was not all in the movie.
Yeah. So it's the lines in the movie are almost delivered exactly as scripted, but that one I copy paste from the script.
I was like, that one's like super long compared to what he says.
So the things he said in the movie like capture the essence of all this.
Yeah.
But there's a handful of things in there that I think are really, really interesting because he talks about how there's no way to control it as a business to keep it respectable.
Well, I believe that translation's wrong.
Okay.
Because I believe he says, I want to make it a business and keep it respectable. And then he lays out the rules for that.
Okay.
So I believe I think that's,
okay.
I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But I'm almost positive he says, I want to keep it a business, but make it respectable.
You've seen it way more times than me. Let's assume that's right. Because both the script as written kind of highlights the reason why prohibition doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because there's no way to control it. But also, as the movie actually produced it, or at least as we remember it, that kind of talks about how the business incentive, if this were subjected to free market, the business's incentive is to make this respectable.
Yes.
You want your business to be something that people are going to come to. That's why, we don't see beer truck drivers shooting at each other today, because that's not good for the beer business. So he wants to keep it away from schools. He wants to keep it away from moms. And then, of course, there's explicit racism here. I've looked into it somewhat. I've not been able to find a whole lot of evidence that the mafia directly targeted the African-American community. But it is kind of like an open secret that the federal government tried to use drugs, specifically crack cocaine, to disrupt the Harlem Renaissance and keep the African-American population in a lower economic class.
I mean, the mob, from what I've read, definitely had an input in the drug war for sure.
Okay.
But I think you're correct. I think it shows kind of what he said. He's saying, okay, as of right now, this isn't controlled. So if we take it under our control as a business, like you said, we can keep it respectable. And that's how all free markets work. If we can actually give the power to these business owners to make that decision, and as people and consumers in the free market, we get to decide whether or not to participate. I think that's the way forward. I think they're promoting that in a lot of ways. They even make a point, oh, I'm sure you can. It was kind of a threat to veto, but, oh, I'm sure, we can pay for such services. We're not communists.
Mm-hmm.
So they even make, even though in my opinion, it was a threat. So they are kind of forcing his hand anyway. So I wouldn't say it was a crazy amount of a choice, but, they even reference that.
Yeah. Well, we talked about this about a week ago. You had mentioned that scene. And so I was watching for this scene. I was waiting for it. So Barzini says, Don Corleone, and again, this is the script, not the transcript. Don Corleone is too modest. He had the judges and politicians in his pocket and he refused to share them. His refusal is not the act of a friend. He takes the bread out of the mouths of our families. Times have changed. It's not like the old days where everybody can go his own way. If Don Corleone had all the judges and politicians in New York, then he must share them or let others use them. Certainly, he can present a bill for such services. We're not communists, after all. But he has to let us draw water from the well. It's that simple. Now, the transcript, all those same lines are there. They're in a different order.
I was going to say that's pretty much what it, yeah.
Yeah.
That was pretty accurate.
I really think it's interesting because you pointed out, like, there's implied force here, right? All the other families are on board, get on board. And in Don Corleone's response, he wraps up with, I'm willing to do whatever all of you think is necessary. Whether it was a coerced thing or not, he is consenting at this point. But coerced consent isn't real consent, but we don't know his mind, right? So,
and I think he was coming from the motivation of Michael's in Sicily.
Yeah.
So even like he mentioned, you know, like if something were to befall him, you know, a lightning strike, even if it's that,
yeah,
you know, I will blame some of the people in these rooms. So I think he was not saying this is correct, but in his head, I think he was trying to get him home. Mm-hmm. And then he knew from that point on, he was going to be the Don.
Yeah.
So he would be able to find the traitor. He would be able to settle all of that family business if Michael is back and home.
Yeah.
You know, so I think he was cutting that deal, even though it definitely was coercion. He was threatening him, saying, a refusal is not a friend and whatever. And even by saying, like, you must share and you must let us draw, like, I don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
So even all of that is very aggressive speaking from Barzini.
Oh, for sure.
And very implied, yeah. So I think it's an interesting, because you're right, he technically did consent because they followed through.
Right.
But is it real? And I think we face a lot of that in the U.S. I think we could point to a lot of things where that's kind of been the case, including recently in the past couple of years. So I think it's an interesting contrast.
Yeah. Interestingly, though, like Don Corleone is not a man above coercion.
Yeah.
We've seen offers you can't refuse.
Yeah. Which.
Oh, yes.
I was a little bummed that line was said multiple times in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as iconic.
I remember what I was going to say.
Lines.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, the thing I was going to say is that in so many mafia movies, they make a point of having dialogue to clarify that what is about to be a threat is going to be worded in such a way that it can't come back legally on them.
Correct.
This movie doesn't handhold you through that, but it does do it a lot.
Yeah.
The most handholding you get is the first time, and I guess every time it comes up again, of offer you can't refuse. Which obviously, like, this is implied force, but like in a court transcript, you really can't take anything from that. It was a really good offer. I couldn't refuse it.
And, I mean, as the audience watching that, if Michael never explained that to Kay in the beginning, we still wouldn't know necessarily what that offer would be or why it would be used in multiple situations or, you know, that would kind of be guessing. So Michael saying that in the beginning, I think is very crucial. Like, if somebody catches that, they might not fully understand what that actually means in the context of the rest of the movie.
Yeah. And then later in the movie, I think the first time we get an offer you can't refuse being made is Robert Duvall's character, Tom Hagen, goes to Waltz because he wants to get Johnny Fontaine, who's Frank Sinatra, involved in a movie. And part of the offer he can't refuse is you're going to have some union trouble with, I think it was actors or writers. I can't remember what it was, but it was so timely. You're going to have some union trouble, and we can make sure that it's not that bad.
Well, and the negative side was one of them was going to...
From the heroin from marijuana to
heroin.
Correct, yeah.
And they could make sure that wouldn't happen. But, you know, we're to believe that at this point the Corleone family is not in narcotics. Like how he was going to deliver on that promise, who knows? But the union one I thought was really interesting because as we talked about with on the waterfront, the mafia have been tied up with unions since the beginning. They beat up scabs, but they also beat up people who are striking when they're not supposed to strike, and they beat up people who aren't striking when they're supposed to strike. So they're a force for hire.
Yep. Agreed.
Also, and this is just a weird thing, it's been said many times in this podcast, my all-time favorite movie is Steve Martin's The Jerk.
The Jerk.
When Waltz is showing off his property, you know that pool scene where they walk around the pool?
I've not seen... Wait... You're talking about The Godfather.
In The Godfather.
I've not seen it.
Remember where he's showing off how great his property is, the Arabian horse, all that stuff?
Yes.
And there's a scene where he's like walking through a garden and pool. They use that exact same backyard in The Jerk in one of my favorite scenes. And I was like, hey, that's the thing. And so, now I get the joke on an extra level because now they're making fun of The Godfather as well. And
once you've seen The Godfather, you'll see it pop up in a lot of other like movies and TV shows and even smaller things that people wouldn't necessarily like. The baptism scene is always in like sitcoms and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And sometimes people don't know it's from a Bob movie maybe, but they don't actually know what, so it's really cool to see all of the references that are just throughout pop culture.
Have either of you watched the Boy Meets World series?
I've seen episodes.
I super did.
Okay.
Loved it.
I don't think I've watched anything with a mob up until this episode. So the one episode where Sean...
Yes, where he's a waiter.
Yes, and it's the two Italian guys at the table.
Yes.
I need you to do so. Like that was my first introduction to mob entertainment.
Yeah.
Was the Boy Meets World episode. And that's like ingrained in my head. And they're actually coming to Cleveland, by the way. Not a sponsor, but the Pod Meets World, the podcast, they're coming to Cleveland.
Are you serious?
This fall.
And they're going to guest show on our
It's
podcast.
Topanga,
Probably
Sean,
not.
and Eric.
That'd be,
And
big
whatever
guests.
their actors' names are. They're coming to Cleveland to film an episode of their podcast this fall. They just announced it yesterday as we're filming this.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I would love to see that. But yeah, so that was my first introduction, and that was an iconic scene that I now see they were referencing stuff like this, like just you've come to me, like that whole deal, like
on my daughter's wedding day.
Yeah, I can help you. Like
I will say, I hated the way he mumbled, and I know he had cotton balls in his. I hated it.
I loved.
I loved it, and honestly, it is. Like, for example, my grandfather talked exactly like that. He had a deep, raspy voice like that. You couldn't, it was very broken English, but he spoke very calmly.
Okay.
In my opinion, in like the Italian community or whatever.
It's a believable character.
Especially for the older Italians, I'm not saying like the newer generation by any means, but like my father and, absolutely 100% spot on. Like, they had a lot of, I'm sure you guys saw in your research, the mob had a lot to do with the making of this movie. There were certain things that couldn't be said. They made sure they combed over the script to make sure, like, I believe it was La Cosa Nostra didn't pop up. And, they combed over to make sure that these things were done a certain way. Luca Brasi in the movie, for example, like the reason he does get killed that quickly is because he was there to look at the set. He was there to make sure that things were going so straight. So fun fact, when he's in the movie and he's shaking before he goes to talk to Vito, that was really him shaking because he was so nervous to be around Marlon Brando that they just kept it in and wrote around it. So that's why he's shaking so much, because he's just terrified to like act with Marlon Brando. So the mob had a lot to do with the making of this movie. In part 2.
Okay, so this 1972.
But not part 3?
Not really. No, part 3 is very, very different. I mean, and Michael Corleone, like it still revolves around that family. But it's not the same as far as that's concerned. So like even the commission, like that happened once in history, and they ended up getting bugged and all this stuff, but that was a reference on that,
Yeah, the meeting of the 5 families.
Yes.
Okay, so this was 1972. So obviously when they were making this movie, you just referenced that like the mob was connected to the production of this movie as far as like filtering some things. Does the mob, as we're watching it in this movie, exist today, or does the mob look different now? But is it the same type of thing where it's still family based? Like, is there still something like this that exists today that we know of?
So I don't personally believe it's anything like what The Godfather shows. I think after the 80s, especially after the RICO Act and all that stuff, I think the entire face of the mafia entirely changed. So I think, especially the drugs, like the drugs had a lot to do with it. Cocaine was huge within the mob community in the 80s and 90s. That really hurt a lot of people. People went to prison for life. People were actually getting slammed and in trouble for all of this. So for a modern day mob like this to exist, no. But I do think that we have mobs that exist, but nothing that would be close to this. There's a guy, Michael Francis, who's on YouTube, and he is the only mob member ever to actually get out alive and be able to somewhat talk about it. So he's referenced in Goodfellas, for example. He knew, I know you haven't seen it, but he knew a lot of the players. He was part of one of the families. So he actually talks about if there is a modern, as much as he can say, because he actually still has a hit on him.
Without giving himself away or incriminating himself,
Okay,
right?
so if he still has a hit on him, there's obviously another party that still exists.
Correct.
Okay, so there is still some deep mob family connections that still exist. It just doesn't exist the way it used to or that was depicted in this movie.
Yep.
I find that very fascinating.
About a year ago, Whitney Webb released volumes 1 and 2 of One Nation Under Blackmail, the sordid union between intelligence and crime that gave rise to Jeffrey Epstein. I've listened to half of the first one on audiobook. It's so packed with information that it's all cited that it's hard to focus sometimes. And
link in the comments.
Check it out. Really fascinating. But it's basically about how following the 80s, with all the pressure that came through the drug war and the RICO Act, as she pointed out, basically she asserts, and she's got receipts that she believes backs it up, that the mafia really took over U.S. intelligence agencies, which kind of unifies the two theories for what happened to JFK. It was mafia and intelligence.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's one theory, is that yes, they still exist, but they've taken a very different shape. I don't know if that's true or not. She makes the case. She's got, receipts, but that's up to you, for you, the listener, to decide. But linked below if you want to look into that. Jeff? You okay?
So I had a thought here. I pulled a Nelson. I lost it.
Unfair.
I'm going to start saying that now.
You start a sentence and immediately forget where you're going with it.
Nelson.
Yep, never mind.
It'll come back to me.
All right, I got a line then. Unless, Angela, do you have one?
No.
All right, this is early. The movie opens with a man pleading with Don Corleone
at the wedding,
at his daughter's wedding, pleading that Don Corleone deal with some boys that raped his daughter. He said that he went to the police like a good American. I thought that was an interesting line. Angela, Jeff, do you think that that's true of a, quote, good American? Like, if you want to be a good American citizen, a good patriot, you go to the police first? Don Corleone takes offense with that and says, why didn't you come to me first? But I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that?
I'll let you go first. I do have thoughts.
So are we talking culturally, like then or now? Because I think they're two very different. What?
Either one.
Both.
So,
because culture shifts over time. So, even though that was the cultural mores, that doesn't mean it's correct,
So the first one would be, and I pulled a Nelson. See, why'd you start that? Why did you start that?
Man, I'm good at it.
And I'm trying to think of what. Oh, good American. That's right. I know that Italians that were coming to the United States, they were very big on, you don't learn English, right? Like, you're an American. Like, they were very dead set on, like, being an American first and not being an Italian, at least from my experience. So I think when he was saying that, he genuinely thought he was being a good American. I think that he thought that that's what you would do. And they're from, think of that time, that World War II just ended. They're looking at the United States as they're going to make everything better. If there's injustice, the United States is going to help that. And I think that this shows the flaws in the system. And I think that's where Vito caught that disrespectfully, because he's like, I'm taking care of my own. We can do all of this without government intervention.
Yeah. The reason I exist is because the police aren't good enough at it in our area.
But at the same time, Vito also clarifies in that same conversation that is not justice. Your daughter is still alive.
Yes.
So I think it's also interesting that somebody like him is able to differentiate, hey, your daughter is still alive. So by me, you're asking me for murder. You've never invited me over for coffee. You've never done any of this. My mother's the godmother to your only child. I think that's very interesting. And I think that's worth noting, that he knows the difference between, however he justifies it. That's not justice. Your daughter's still alive. And I think that's a very profound statement coming from him.
Yeah, and then the father responds with, make them suffer then as she suffered. And Don Corleone's like, all right, I can work with that.
Yeah.
What he's looking for there is retributive violence, not escalatory violence.
Absolutely.
But it's still blowback. Like, I'm going to do to you what you did to me. I won't do more to you than what you've done to me. So that's like a sense of nobility, like noble or altruism or whatever.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it still is blowback. And then we see that, this whole movie is about blowback.
Absolutely. I think that's kind of a running theme for sure.
Yeah.
Do I think now the definition of a good American is going to the police? No, not necessarily. I don't think it necessarily in every case. I know personally when I've worked in downtown Cleveland, I've called the police multiple times and gotten their voicemail when I've needed it.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that things are case by case basis. I think that our justice system is severely, severely messed up. And I think it's going to take a lot of fixing to do. So I think it's interesting that the mob, in a lot of ways, were very targeted. Not saying it's correct, but they were very targeted in who they killed or who they like attacked. There was a reason. It wasn't reckless. Even how Sollozzo says, I don't like blood, Tom. I don't like violence.
Mm-hmm.
Blood costs money. And even though it's a messed up moral way to think about it, they really did think about it in that way too. They didn't want to kill somebody who's just innocent. They didn't want to be reckless with it. They were trying to keep an order in their own way.
Yeah.
So I think today is definitely different. I mean, I don't think going to the police for everything is great. I don't think they're necessarily going to help with every situation. And I think they get it wrong a lot more than when the mob was actually in charge.
Yeah.
I think they got it right more often than the government did.
Younger Jeff would have been like, yes, I want to be a good American. Like I said the Pledge of Allegiance in school. I did these things that to me, I was like, I'm a proud American. As I've gotten older, and I think the podcast has something to do with it, and just as I love our nation as a group of collection of
People.
people.
Love
And
the
stuff.
people.
Like this idea of being proud or putting this nationalistic mindset as the forefront, I've gotten less and less about that. I'm not a fan of the pledge anymore. I get why it exists. It makes sense to me on why we came to it.
Right.
But
it exists because of a communist.
And I can see why people can get behind it. And it's almost like it's a rally cry, and I can get behind those things.
Yeah.
But Jeff today would have been like, I don't really care what it takes to be a good American.
Interesting.
But,
Okay.
But my first reaction, no matter what the situation is, what choice can I make that would make me a respectable citizen? So, and there is a difference there. And so in some instances, yeah, there are times where I hope I can rely on the cops and the police. If my house is burning down, I hope I can rely on the fire department. If my car gets robbed, I hope the police if the severe gets, I hope the people that are in a place of governance over that, I hope and pray that they can do their job and do this. That would be my first line of solace, or first line of communication, is the people that exist in this job to solve these problems.
Mm.
But I do understand now in this world that we live in that there's a lot of faults in these systems.
Yeah.
And so my train of thought would go just, okay, if these governmental businesses that exist fell through, what would be the next respectable option for me to choose to solve this problem? Whether it's crime, whether it's health and safety, whether it's just financial needs, even spiritual stuff. We see it in the churches. We see a lot of these gigantic church heads, whether it's Christian, Catholic, other religions. You see some of these big heads, they fall. My altruistic personality, my optimistic side would be yeah, they're put in a place of power. I assume they're going to do their job. That would be the goal. And so I would want to respect that position, being that they've hopefully earned it in a respectable way.
Yeah.
But the reality is there's going to be times where you would have to, by other means, solve problems.
Yep.
And my goal would be just to do that in a respectable way. I know that's vague. I don't know what that would look like in a case by case manner, but I don't really care. I don't care if anyone says, Jeff, you're a good American.
I think
I don't care about that anymore.
I think the way that's handled.
I just want to be a respected citizen. Go, you know what? He's a good person in his community. That's what's important to me.
Yeah. I would push back on two fronts.
Oh, that surprises me.
Yeah, it's totally unlikely to push back. I would say that what he means when he says "be a good American," and what the audience of the time, specifically, especially of the 1940s, the audience of the theoretical audience of the day, what he means by that is, I want to be a moral person. You
got that from "I want to be a good American"?
Yeah.
Because I don't equate morals to America at all.
In 1940s America, the early Captain America,
okay,
right? Like
I didn't
that.
live these times.
That is like the Boy Scout. I am a moral person, and that's what comes first. And I think that's like.
Was that because of the war ending? Do you think that was directly affected by the fact that we just finished a war and we're
I do think that had a lot to do with it.
2 back-to-back World War champs?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. MVP. We're number 1. That's what I think he's saying there. Kind of like this idea that, like, to be a good American, the moral decision is the right decision is to contact the police. So, like answering that question for myself, like, what's the moral thing to do? Sometimes the moral thing to do is to call the police. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the moral thing to do is to engage with this situation directly.
Yeah,
and it depends on the level of that. There's in U.S. history, this and he gets memed a lot in libertarian circles. This guy named Gary Plauché. His son was kidnapped, molested, and raped by a man. And they tracked down this man in another state, and they're flying him in. And Gary Plauché hid in the airport. And when the man came by, he turned and shot him in the head. So the man never went to trial. And there's a friction there of, was justice done? Because the father, under huge conviction that this is the man and I don't want him to walk free, I'm going to have justice now. But what if the jury... Go ahead, Angela.
Oh, keep going. That's what I was just thinking we were going to say the same thing. You know, the court could have messed up somewhere and that guy could have been let free.
Or...
You know, we don't know.
Or the guy messed up. And it turns out this isn't the guy. And the actual person who should be held accountable, you know, is out there still. So it's a complicated thing. On one hand, I'm very sympathetic to a father taking justice into his own hands.
Yeah.
But on the other,
he did it amorally though. Like so I mean I guess if we're equating the label American to moral,
the right thing to do.
Right thing to do.
Yeah, and for the culture of the 1940s, I think that they were essentially interchangeable. Now that's very much not my feelings.
Right, but in that same time, the Corleone family were not morally right at all. Like none of them. Like
they didn't share a lot of the cultural values of the day. Yeah.
So it's not even safe to say like I wouldn't put them as, I wouldn't label them if that's what good American meant. Like I would not label them good Americans.
Right. Well, Don Corleone says, you know, because the guy says I went to the police like a good American. Why didn't you come to me first? And basically, Don Corleone is saying, you should be a good friend before you're a good American.
Yeah.
Now, this may be a little off topic, but I'm curious if it connects. Do we know why, and maybe maybe they talk about in the other 2 movies, do we know why the family came from Italy?
Yes.
Like, why they left?
Yes.
And like what they were seeking?
Okay. I was like, because they're Italian. Because I misunderstood what your question was.
Like, why did they come?
They're Sicilian.
Right. Why did they come to America?
Tomato.
Are you sure you want me to tell you? So
they do talk about it?
Next movie?
Yeah, it's in the next movie.
Okay.
I don't want to spoil anything.
No spoilers.
No spoilers.
I wanted to make that clear before I said anything.
We only spoil movies we've already seen.
Yeah,
Then I will wait on that. I will wait on that. That'll come up next week.
Yep, it's a good story. I want you to experience that for yourself.
So I had planned to watch all 3 movies back to back to back, just for personal, like, marathon style when we do these 2 episodes of podcasting. I'm glad I didn't, though, because of this discussion. I'm glad that there's a little bit of like mystery left still. So I almost watched them all, and I have not done that yet. So, okay. Then it is fascinating, like that. So you're saying that Be a Good American was not for a nationalistic type of.
No, I don't. That's not what I see there.
That meant moral standards.
Yeah, I wanted to do the right thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I would agree with that. I think that they were looking at the U.S. as a tend to be moral compass in a way. Like they were coming here to flee kind of that kind of oppression in a way. And I think they were really like emboldened.
Yeah.
So I would tend to agree with that. Yeah.
You know, that kind of really lends into one of the last big points in the movie. Michael Corleone is talking to Kay and says, my father is no different than any other powerful man. Any man who's responsible for other people, like a senator or a president. And Kay says, how are you so naive? She says, senators and presidents don't have men killed. And he says, well, now who's being naive, Kay? That line for me was like, when I heard him saying that, and she says, how are you so naive? I'm like, this is either a setup or the director has no idea how the world works, right? But like, it's a truth that people don't care for, right? That presidents and senators have people killed.
Mhm.
Every time they vote for military action or, a war, which hasn't happened since World War II, they are having people killed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool. No thoughts?
What if,
No,
my favorite part of that scene is I think you just see a huge change in Michael. I think that's the final point where you're like, this guy super means business. He's a completely different man than you saw in the very first part of the movie. And I think that's my favorite part of that entire scene, is just seeing how much he's changed. I mean, he gets a little aggressive, he throws his, hand down, don't ask me about my business. He starts to get really defensive, and he turns into Don Michael Corleone, right? I feel like at that, right after that baptism, which I thought it's one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie. It's one of my favorite scenes in the whole franchise, was the baptism scene. I thought it was beautifully done. I thought it was very interesting, and I thought the contrast was great. How he's renouncing Satan and renouncing evil as he's going ahead and taking care of family business. I thought that was very well put.
Yep. The way that they increase tension through those scenes too. Right, the priest's chant is yelling in Latin. The key change so the music keeps having a key change going to higher and higher octaves, and the baby's crying, and it's just like tension, and then all these guys get wiped out.
And that tension kind of doesn't end, until kind of the end. Like once it hits the baptism scene, it kind of doesn't stop. You have you have that whole situation with Carlo. You have the situation with Tessio. You have all of these things that are going on that it doesn't really lighten up until it doesn't light up at all. Really.
Spoiler alert for anyone who's seen the Marvel series Secret Invasion.
I haven't, but go ahead.
Okay, and I don't know if it's a direct correlation from the movie we were talking about, but the last episode of this miniseries, through the storyline, you find that the Skrulls have been invaded and stuff, and the end of the movie is the U.S. American president giving a speech to the nation, talking about how we're going to take out anybody that's not Earthborn from Terra. Yeah. And during that scene, you see, as he's talking, as they're showing him exactly with the baptism scene, you see these assassinations of different characters that we met through the movie, or that were just in a scene during the movie. Right. It's like it played out almost the same way. You see this powerful character come into power, this character come into power, make this bold statement, or just this final, goosebumps walk away, to quote Nick Miller from New Girl. But at the same time, they're showing these assassinations of these characters and laying down the law while something else is happening. So I took it as they stole the cinematic artistic art from that. And it was probably one of the more powerful movies in that series. That series was not as exciting as I was hoping it was going to be. But I did like the emotion of the end of that, and I felt that again more authentically with The Godfather.
Interesting. There's some old school
hip hop.
No, yes, actually, that does answer what I'm about to how I'm going to end the sentence, but that's not what I was going for. There's some old school moments throughout this movie that are about misogyny and sexism, but in a I will protect you rather than you are less than me.
Yes.
And a couple of those that I wanted to discuss, especially having you here on the line, Angela, because I know how
much of a misogynistic person.
She's a tiny woman, but she's intimidating.
That's right.
So hold on, where's the line?
The careless one.
There's that one, but there's another. So there's two that one of them is kind of misogynist. The other one is about what it is to be a man. And so the first one we've already talked about, actually, which is a man that never spends time with his family can never be a real man. And then later, as you already touched on there, there's the line about careless. He says, I went through my life trying not to be careless. Women and children can be careless, but not men. So I want to know, Angela, you as a woman, a more modern woman, especially compared to the women in the show, or in the movie, sorry. How do you respond to these lines? And maybe also, when you were younger, how did you respond to them, and has that changed?
Yeah. So my opinions haven't changed. I don't think they're misogynistic at all, actually. my dad, I see a lot of my dad in a lot of this, and I can see my dad saying both of those things. So I do believe that if you do not spend time with your family, you can't really be a real man. If you're out cheating and you're out doing all of these other things and you can go home at night and call yourself a man, I personally do not see how you can do that. So I entirely agree with that. Do I think as a woman I'm necessarily careless with everything? No, but I do see that men and women are very different. And I do respect the fact that, like, my boyfriend is definitely not as careless as I am. He's very careful, and I trust him to lead me and protect me and provide for me. So I see where Vito's coming from. It's a very old school Italian mentality, but that's how my dad raised me, was to be, the men around you should protect you. They should provide for you. You should trust them to lead you in the right direction. So I didn't look at that as a misogynistic thing. Like you touched on earlier, I think it's more of a protective standpoint of, I don't think women are necessarily inferior, but I do think that they should be protected. I do think that they should be held under a little bit different of standards because we biologically are different and we biologically have different roles to play. And this is not the role that they play. And we need to protect that. So I really loved that they had that because it shows that there is a clear definition of that and a clear need for a man to be a man and a woman to be a woman and a time and a place for both of those things. In my personal opinion, I do not think it's misogynistic at all. I think it's actually the opposite. That's my modern woman, I guess, conservative point of view.
Conservative constitutionalist modern woman.
Correct.
I think it's really interesting. He doesn't say women and children are careless.
Correct.
He says that they can be.
Correct.
Like they have permission. They have
the ability
the liberty to, right? But men don't have that same liberty. So it's more of a responsibility approach to concept of carelessness than it is a accusation about women not being as responsible as men.
Yes.
I don't know if this scene for me was the one I'm about to say it was a misogynistic thing, or if he would have done this to any other character depending on his emotion. But the hardest scene for me in this movie to watch was when I forget what character it was, but the gentleman beat up his girlfriend that was pregnant.
Yeah.
Or his
Carlo,
wife, like his wife. Yeah, like that was the hardest scene to observe.
Connie Corleone.
Yep.
And again, he had an issue no matter, like he was about to pick a fight no matter who was. Like I don't think it was a sexist thing.
Right.
He was just looking to rough someone up.
Yeah.
And it just happened to be someone who stood her ground and spoke her mind and wanted to defend herself and have that ability to do that. And like, that was a hard scene to watch. That was probably the hardest scene in this movie for me.
Yeah.
Was watching her back into the bathroom and then him going after like that.
Yep.
That was hard.
And it's even crazier when you think of the fact that all of that was premeditated.
Yeah.
Barzini hired Carlo to do all of that.
Yeah.
He knew that as soon as he did that, Connie was going to call Sonny. And the first time it happened, he went over, he beat him up, he did all that stuff, said, I'll kill you again the next time. So now they had him.
Yeah.
So now he had to just do it, make Connie mad one more time, have a girl call, set it up very easily. And I think he would have done it regardless of if Barzini paid him or not.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. I think he's that kind of man.
Yeah.
But it really drives it even home more to know that all of it was a plan specifically to assassinate Sonny and use his hot-headedness against him. And I think that's crazy.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
I don't have anything else outside of the wrap-up.
There was one scene that I really love personally, and we kind of talked, it is the same scene where he talks about women being careless or can be careless. Yeah. But, him and Michael are talking about the Barzini meeting and all of this stuff. And he looks at him and says, and this isn't a direct quote, but, I wanted more for you. I didn't want this for you. I was hoping one day you would be the person, Senator Corleone, Governor Corleone.
Yeah.
And I think that's very interesting because Vito genuinely did not want this for Michael. And he's heartbroken over the fact that Michael's now chosen this path. But he wanted Michael to be able to pull all of these strings. And he wanted Michael to be the outward leader and continue this name in a legitimate way.
Yep.
He wanted them to become legitimate. So it was so sad and heartbreaking to see him in his final days talking to his son about this.
Yeah.
And seeing that heartbreak, knowing the life that's ahead of him instead of the path that he wanted to choose for him, that he could have easily done. But circumstances happen. But I think that's it's one of my favorite scenes in the entire movie because I think their conversation is beautiful. I think it's great. I think it's very insightful. But you can just see Marlon Brando's acting's great in this movie, but you can just see the pain and the heartbreak that he has when he's talking to Michael, and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
His ability, like when he was laying in the bed and he wasn't able to communicate, his ability, like to just kind of move his hand just so slightly, and it spoke everything. Like when he found out what Sonny did, and that Sonny after, like when he found out, and like he just kind of did this for the listeners. I'm moving my hand ever so slightly, like just like that was just, and then the room cleared, like just like, and it felt like that was one of the most intimidating little hand gestures I've ever seen. And he just laid there motionless and just moved his hand. I'm like he's a man that people knows powerful, whether he's laying in a bed physically handicapped or he's fully capable. People fear this guy. People revere, like, both. Mm-hmm. This guy, and I thought that was just a very powerful representation of just the ability he has, even when he's incapacitated.
Yeah.
And I think that shows really well for the actor and for the director, just to be able to convey that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. There's one last thing, because we've spoken very glowingly about him. And I've said in past episodes that, the state is a mafia parading its human rights organization. Really, what I see difference here, this is just my anarchist 2 cents. What I see as a difference here between the Corleone family or any other mob family and the state is that the Corleone family is honest about who they are.
Yeah.
Right? We are people that will repay retribution. We are going to murder to get our way, and through perceived checks and balances which have been corrupted, we see the state as being legitimate for doing all the exact same things. That ties back into that line of who's being naive now.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. I'm really excited for you guys to watch the second one, because this is not a spoiler, but it just delves into the political world entirely.
Nice.
Oh, awesome.
So you're able to see
it
completely ties in. So you're going to love it. It's very, very interesting when you see how the worlds connect.
That's
cool.
Exciting. And at the end of this movie, they're packing up and moving to Vegas.
Correct.
And then they changed their mind, I think.
Oh, dude.
No.
That's what I understood.
Oh, no,
I was wrong?
They go to Vegas?
Yes. So they told Carlo that we were going to go, and they ended up not going with Carlo because they were going to murder him. But they still decided to move to Vegas.
Oh, okay.
So, yes.
Okay. That's what I meant.
Because the house was still empty. We just see the door closing. And it looks like they're having to start a meeting. But I didn't perceive that as they're staying. I just perceived that they're going to have a meeting.
And I guess all the stuff was in a moving van.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I'm eager to see.
Okay.
They're literally transitioning to a new place. So
we're running out of time with Angela here. Let's get into some wrap-up questions.
We have some of those.
Great.
Cool. All right. Awesome. Would you guys recommend this film?
Yeah.
Absolutely. It always will.
Yeah, I was worried going in that because of all that's come after it, that if you've not seen this already, it's not going to hold up.
Mm-hmm.
That's largely how I feel about some Star Wars movies. Right? Like, if you've seen a lot of sci-fi since then, this is going to feel very reductive and repetitive.
Yeah.
But no, man, I think that this, even though it really kind of, I don't know if it established the genre, but it really is a hallmark of the genre, and I don't think it's been outdone yet.
I would definitely recommend it. I very much enjoyed this movie, and it exceeded expectations. I didn't know what to expect, so I had low expectations, or I had no expectations, I guess.
Yeah.
And it was entertainmentally, I was entertained. But it was also, it had me, I was consumed with the storyline. I was consumed with the culture, with the reality. I wanted to spend more time in Italy. I wanted to spend more time. I wanted to know more about all of these different things that were going on. I was invested, and I was captivated by this movie. So I absolutely recommend it.
And honestly, I feel like in the hour or so that we've been discussing, we've really only covered at most half of the things that could be discussed with this movie.
Yeah,
it's that good.
It's that good.
Kind of the next leading question is, would you change the rating? It's rated R.
No,
I wouldn't change it either.
I wouldn't. I think rated R movies would be a lot wilder than this one is today, but I still think that what's in this movie, it ought to be rated R.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a second to think about that, but yeah, I agree.
I'm just doing a quick search for the top, because
you got brief female nudity, not a lot of language, but a lot of violence.
That's what I was going for, was the violence aspect of it, even though it's not.
Yeah.
Other than Sonny, I wouldn't say it's very gory. So that's what made me think PG-13 at first. Was it's not super gory, and it kind of shows a lot of. I mean, it shows a lot of murder, but not in a way that is usually rated R, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think all of it combined could warrant a rated R, but my original instinct was a PG-13.
Yeah.
One of the weird things in this movie that made me think it was going to be way cleaner as far as sexual content is the song being sung at the wedding is Luna Mezzo Mare, or Moon Amid the Sea.
Your Italian's wonderful.
Thank you. I've been working on it. But the whole song is just, each verse is an innuendo. This is the English translation. There's a moon amid the sea. Mother, must I get married? My daughter, who should I get for you? Mother, I leave it up to you. And then the mother says, if I give you the barber, he will come and he will go. But he'll always hold his razor in his hands. If he likes the idea, he'll razor you, oh my daughter. Now, I thought that was murder the first time, but then every other verse, it's explicitly innuendo. So, for example, if I give you the shoemaker, he'll always hold his hammer in his hands. And if he likes the idea, he'll hammer you. If I give you the farmer, he'll always hold his plow in his hands. And if he likes the idea, he'll plow you. And if he's a butcher, he'll hold a sausage in his hands. If he's a fisherman, he'll hold a fish in his hands.
Probably a branzino.
If he's a gardener, he'll hold a cucumber in his hands. So, given that they don't even provide the translation to the song, I was like, oh, this is going to, when it comes to sexual content, this movie's going to be very, very clean. For the most part, compared to what you'd expect in a rated R movie, I'd say it is, but it's still enough to be rated R.
Yeah.
I would definitely recommend this, but I'd be cautious of who I recommend it to. Like, obviously, like, it's definitely worth an adult to watch it. Like, I can't think of any student that would benefit from watching it.
I don't know how old you were, Angela, the first time you saw it, but it was probably still too young.
I have been watching horror movies since as early as I can remember, so I
stand by what I said.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I wouldn't change the rate.
That's what made me a strong woman when I'm saying, Nelson.
And me, the soft, fat man.
No safe spaces. I learned from a young age. This is what the world is like.
Nobody's coming. Carry a gun.
Keep the cannolis.
I'm a small girl. I need it.
All right. Has it aged well? 1972, based in the 40s.
Yeah, I think it's aged super well. Period pieces tend to be time capsules, and then also modern pieces set in their day can also be a time capsule. I was expecting with this being a period piece made in the 70s, it was going to feel cheap. But I didn't feel that at all. Like, I felt like it felt like I would imagine a large portion of the budget was just making it feel accurate.
Yeah. There's even cars you could see with wooden bumpers.
Yeah.
You know, stuff like those little details where, you know, it really brings you, not that we were alive in that time, but really brings you back to that time period of just seeing all of that different, the amount of effort that they put into the set designs and all of that kind of stuff, I think is really interesting as well. So I think it aged beautifully. I think it clearly represents the time.
Yeah. And I think it'll continue to be a nice time capsule, as you say, like, I don't see it getting worse as time gets older. I think this is going to stand the test of time with the way it's. Francis did a great job directing this movie.
Yeah,
and that
big
shows,
fan of Francis.
That shows through the almost 50, if not over 50 or 51 years that it's been out. So I did that math in my head. That could be wrong. All right, last question. Last question here. Would this movie be in your personal top 250?
I'm honestly surprised to say that yes.
You're surprised? Why are you surprised?
For all the same reasons that I said, like, I wasn't expecting much going into it. I was expecting it to feel reductive, not from its own fault, but because so much has come since. But I think even still, given all that's been done in the crime genre, and I love mob movies, and somehow never got to this one. I think it really holds up still.
Angela, is this your favorite movie of all time?
It is in my top 5. Okay. So
can you give us your top
5? So as of right now, it goes between The Godfather and Godfather Part 2. Like I said, every time I watch one, so I almost have that as my number 1 spot, almost in a way, because it kind of changes.
Yeah.
Scream. You guys might laugh at me for that, but Scream, Wes Craven, Halloween, Goodfellas, Nightmare on Elm Street. So those were my top
6
favorite, movies. That was okay. So 6, but those are my top.
Well,
so
5, 2, or 1's a sequel. So we'll count it. We'll allow it.
Yeah. It's
an even split for mafia movies and horror movies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting. All right.
That's all I've got. Before we get into kind of the wrap up of the episode itself, Nelson, Angela, is there anything you'd like to plug? You don't have to, but is there anything you'd like to give our audience members if you would like them to find you? If not, we won't plug you. But like, is there anything that you'd like to say as we part ways tonight?
I mean, everyone wants to follow me, they can. I'm on Facebook, Angela Mannarino, and my Twitter's at @Mannarino_, and that's AMANNARINO. So
awesome.
Feel free to give me a follow, and I would love to talk about movies with people. So let's go.
Awesome.
And she has a not insubstantial Twitter following.
Not insubstantial Twitter following.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean X following?
X, yeah.
You have an X following.
You have an X following. You have a bunch of former followers.
It just sounds weird.
Yeah.
It is. It's not Twitter anymore, right?
It's not Twitter
Okay.
anymore, but
Okay.
the culture hasn't adapted yet because X feels weird.
I have not been on X since my app changed.
Yeah.
I haven't been on it.
Yeah, X feels weird to say, so it'll be Twitter.
What about this Threads thing? Have you guys messed around with Threads?
It boomed for a week, and it's dead now.
Is it?
I did not join that trend train, so I'm not entirely sure.
And what is it? What is different about it than other social media?
It's a lot like Twitter, except it's got all of the algorithmic processes of Facebook as well as all their censorship. So if you want a less good product, there it is.
Threads. Cool. Well, Nelson, is there anything we need to tell the listeners before next week's episode? Is there anything that they need to know in the next 7 days?
I'm trying to think. Next week, we will be covering the sequel to The Godfather.
The Godmother.
The Godmother Strikes Back.
Yep.
Godmother Strikes Back next week. It'll be just Jeff and I. And then after that, we'll be moving into Spooktober, won't we? Yep.
Yeah. Yes.
Love that.
Yep. My mental calendar says yes.
Yes.
I love that.
Spooky season.
What's the first movie you guys are going to watch?
Scary Skeletons.
I mean, we
going into
that's up in the
Spooktober
air right now.
Yeah,
because it depends on a guest. We're working on the logistics for that. So it depends on the guest in which order we do it. So we have a couple we know we'll do. We'll keep that too close to our cuff right now, but we just don't know in what order it's coming out. So can't say that for sure right now. But the fun thing about us going into Spooktober is it's our 1 year anniversary.
That's right.
So the first Monday in October will be our 1 year of podcasting.
That's right. And we opened with Psycho, which was a Hitchcock movie.
Correct.
So that's why we're seeing what works out, but I think we can expect another Hitchcock movie.
Yeah. So very exciting.
A lot of other fun things coming in
very soon. Very stuff that'll be announced before October.
That's right.
So as this episode's out, some stuff may even be No, it will not. So don't listen to me. But very soon, before October, announcements will start to be made of some things that are coming up for you. So very exciting. I'm being super ominous.
I think you are correct. Yes.
Omnibus.
Yeah, we're being pretty omnibus about it, but
we are very excited for this second year of podcasting.
Yeah.
Angela, you've been wonderful. We'd love to have you on again.
Wow.
I would love to. I can't speak for
Nelson.
But there's other mob movies. Maybe we'll have you on for another horror movie. Thank you for coming on. We appreciate your perspective, and we've enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for having me on.
This is my favorite interview of one of my employers ever.
When we go off the air, I would love for you to give me a very honest explanation of how Nelson is around work. How he really is at work.
All right.
I got you.
All right. Thank you so much. And we'll catch you next week. Godfather Part 2.
We'll see you. Thanks for listening. We had a great time putting this together for you.
To join the conversation, find us on Facebook and Instagram at Silver Screen Biases.
And on Twitter at Screen Biases.
We believe in value for value, so if you found value in our show, we ask you to consider supporting us.
Links to our social media and support can be found in the show notes.